Hello and welcome back to this afternoon's session of Orkney Aviation Festival, where we're looking at sustainable aviation. SATE are the magic 4 letters, Sustainable Aviation Test Environment, and somebody who's been very much involved in testing is Yvette Lawrenson from Windracers. Now, the challenge has been freight, and particularly those smaller items or medium-sized items of freight that are often extremely urgent, and other ways of getting them moved from A to B. Well, Yvette's company, Windracers, certainly has a number of solutions with uncrewed aircraft. Yvette herself has been involved over the years in building such aircraft and then developing, making sure that they reach the regulatory standard. Now she's leading the project that's involving some fascinating looking aircraft landing and taking off from Kirkwall Airport. Well, welcome, Yvette. I'm looking forward to hearing what you've got to tell us about progress with Windracers.
Yeah, that was a great introduction. So yes, I'm Yvette Lawrenson. I am the regulatory lead at Windracers, and through that have been doing a lot of the project lead for Windracers in state. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we've done in the past, what our current plans is for operating within state, and then what we see as the future of us operating within the Highlands and Islands, and looking at those UAV logistics for the future. So I'll tell you a little bit more about the company. If we go next slide. So if you haven't heard of us, Windracers are a Southampton-based company. We produce technology looking to improve the transport logistics and human aid operations with the use of UAVs that were specifically designed for this purpose. We started off as a subset from Southampton University, and then since then we've grown quite a lot. And over the last year, we've been growing the fleet and the company itself. We've been hiring in an awful lot over the last year, and really building the team specifically for these state operations and looking to operate within Orkney and Shetland, and bringing in operators that are able to do that. So that photo there is a picture of one of our new aircraft. So I'll tell you a little bit about that as well. Next slide. So we're currently operating the Ultra aircraft. This is the uncrewed low-cost transport aircraft. It was originally designed to carry 100 kilograms, 1,000 kilometers, and the cargo bay is about the size of that of an estate car, just so you can picture 700 liters. We've been doing a lot of training on short takeoff and landing. The original design goal was this 150 meters for takeoff and landing, but I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. A big part of this aircraft is its reliability and the redundant systems that we've built into it. The design goal is that no single point of failure, and that's throughout the aircraft. So the propulsion system, the avionics, communications, and then particularly with the control surfaces, we have 24 interchangeable control surfaces, which means that our maintenance team, when they travel to the aircraft, don't need to take an aileron, a elevator, and a rudder. They can really just take those segments and they'll fit into any part of the aircraft. So then the aircraft itself is, I say earlier, quite like a microlight. So 10-meter wingspan and a 450 kilogram max takeoff limit. We cruise at about 62, 64 knots. And while it does need a runway, this can be unprepared. So gravel, grass, tarmac, we can land on ice where we need to. And the whole thought process behind this is that low build and low operating costs to make it an efficient service that can just fit into already existing services that are already there. So if we move on to the next slide. So a bit about where we came from. The original idea where the company sort of grew from, I guess, is this idea of humanitarian aid within South Sudan. And from that, we developed this aircraft, and that took us into sort of 2020 kind of timeline. Obviously, at that point, we were all in lockdown, and we were looking at how the aircraft could help with that. A lot of the ferries during that time were cancelled, particularly between the mainland and the Isle of Wight, which is not too far away from us, where we were based at the time. So we did some flight trials from the mainland over the Solent, carrying PPE for COVID-19 aid. And from that, we did something similar down in Cornwall. So I think the third picture down there, you can see the flight that we did from North Cornwall coast down into the Isles of Scilly, again carrying medical supplies, and then that grew into a scheduled flights 5 days a week that we ran for a number of weeks, and continuing that medical aid, and then also working with Royal Mail. If we go to the next slide. So some big operational highlights that we've achieved so far. Obviously, State 1 was a big thing for us. We were flying up in, I think the top left there is Wick, and connecting the mainland to Orkney. And then on the right, I think that's Unst, where we did the most northerly airfield. And then, as I was talking about, Cornwall on the bottom of the page there, that's the most southerly airfield. So we really do fly all over the UK. And some brand new things from this year is our testing and training facility that we've set up in Lambeda, where we've done a lot of training this year, particularly bringing in those operators that I mentioned before for the state operations, so that when we are operating, they'll be ready to go. And we do a lot of like simulation training and then training on the actual aircraft. The sort of biggest thing very recently was our aircraft carrier. I mentioned earlier that we did, we've been doing a lot of short takeoff and landing training. And you can see there a picture of Ultra on the aircraft carrier. Sorry. And I really would recommend going and seeing, and if you can find the videos, I'm sure they're all over social media and stuff now, of that aircraft. I think it was the first fixed wing landing on a British aircraft carrier. So that was really, really impressive for us, really, really happy about that, that it went ahead. Yeah, if we go on to the next slide. So we've operated up in Orkney before. We did 4 weeks of operations back in 2021, flying from Kirkwall down to Wick, so connecting the mainland with Orkney, and then also up to North Ronalds Ead and Fair Isle. We got a huge amount of press for these flights. It was a big thing. being able to operate regularly for a number of weeks, having that ability. And it's a thing that very few drone companies have been able to do, even since then, just because of the regulatory environment within the UK. So then we completed the Orkney trials, and we moved on to Shetland, which I think is on the next slide. And in doing so, we created this link between Orkney and Shetland, which I believe at the time was the longest point-to-point route ever flown by a civilian UAV, and that was the flight between Tingwall and Kirkwall. And we also did a flight up to Unst at the time, delivering packages, and then came back again. So that kind of takes us up to the end of SATE 1. And then we moved on to SATE 2. I don't know if Andrew's already mentioned about the progress of the project, but I'll tell you a little bit about where we are currently on the next slide. So the big change between our original operations and these new ones is this idea of the hub and spoke network. So creating a hub, particularly, so for example, with Orkney operations, a hub within Kirkwall where we could have a ground control operator, and they're able to dispatch as needed, when and where, an aircraft to the Orkney Island Council airfield. So we're looking at sort of North Ron and Westry, and being able to supply just slightly more logistical aid between those islands. And it all features into that long-term strategy of integration of uncrewed aircraft into just normal processes. And that's really what we're looking to head towards. In doing so, we've had to do a lot of engagement. So we're looking at what works for people, what is useful to people, what the general aviation community believes would be requirement for us to be able to operate with them in that unsegregated airspace. So looking at the needs between air traffic control and drones, which there's very little sort of guidance on how UAVs introduce themselves within that environment. And then building on that and how visual the aircraft is. So are the other aircraft in the area using electronic means to say where they are? Can the operator who's based in Kirkwall or might be based in Tingwall see the other aircraft that are operating in that area? And so we're equipped with ADS-B transponder, so we're very visual to other people. Something else that we learned from last time is also operating in all weather conditions. So we've done a lot of work on the aircraft to do with that, and that kind of moves into when we'll be operating this year. So if we go to the next slide, we're looking at 3 different phases of these operations. So we're hoping to operate in sort of November time for our Orkney phase. And this will look like a GCS operator who is based in Kirkwall and is dispatching aircraft to ED, North Ronaldsay, Westry and Papua Westry, as and when they're needed. And we will have a pilot out there who's able to see how the aircraft is doing, make sure it's deconflicted with other aircraft. And then we'll move on to the Shetland Island phase, where we'll provide that connection again between Orkney and Shetland. We'll set up a hub within Tingwall, and then from there you'll be able to send the aircraft up to Unst, down to Fair Isle, and we'll be going to Fula, which is a new one for us, but the whole team is very excited for it. And then we've got phase 3, which is connecting the Western Isles in the Outer Hebrides. Something really big that we're working on at the moment is the Norway showcase flight. This idea of connecting the UK and Norway. The big issues with this is that regulation on who's regulating it, so which country, and then getting that airspace and making sure that there's that connection there. So the actual aircraft we've now tested, we can see that it can fly the distance. I think it's something like 250 nautical miles, which we've tested and it's done. So now the technology is there. We're just looking to push towards that that first flight between inter-border connection. So if we move on to the next slide. What it's all aiming for, and how we're all what we're really pushing for here is that integration into standard operations. So I put a photo up here of Windracers Ultra on the left with a air task aircraft landing at the same time. It's all about that. It's all about like getting into this unsegregated, you know, like sorry, this unsegregated and getting involved in the processes that already exist, and really helping them out and being able to connect remote communities with the technology that already exists, and having that proof of concept, which is what we're working towards at the moment, and then building on that and shaping that regulatory environment that is currently quite hostile, perhaps, to the UAV industry. If we move on to the next slide. So part of that is how we're working in the mail and parcel industry. We're really trying to revolutionize that middle mile logistics. So that's airport to airport. You know, we're not necessarily working on that drone flight deliver to your door type logistics. Very much trying to do that, connect the remote communities of airport to airport, and then being able to take that payload to a hub or to a depot, and then sending it out from there. Other things that we're working in at the moment, I believe the next slide. So we're also working in that humanitarian assistance. That's where we came from. That's where where the aircraft was designed for. And we're really dedicated to this, addressing the global food insecurity, being able to provide that that regular service, and making sure that it is efficient, and being able to connect areas that are currently not connectable by human aid, by crewed aviation, due to perhaps the insecurity of the areas. And the way of doing that is to provide an efficient and cost-effective approach to that emergency assistance, which is where drones come in. They're much cheaper to maintain and to run, and require less people. Obviously, you've got the ground control operator who would be sending the aircraft out, and can be based, you know, anywhere in the world. So you wouldn't necessarily have to fly a pilot out to a location just to fly the aircraft. You could have that person operating from a different country even. So if we move on to the next slide. We're also doing a lot of work in the environmental sector. We've been doing surveys in, we are looking to do surveys in Antarctica. So
Hello, I'm just coming in to join because somebody's computer's frozen now. I had the worry that it was mine, but it may not be. It may be Yvette's, so she'll be trying to unfreeze, I imagine. On the other hand, if it's mine that has frozen, I suppose nobody will be hearing this. It's a fascinating talk, and hopefully all will be well, and we'll pick up the thread shortly.
Just to reassure you, Howie, it is in fact Yvette's computer that has fallen off the call. I'm sure she's trying to rejoin as we speak.
The message has just come through that it is in fact Yvette's computer, that something has happened. She'll be trying to rejoin us, I imagine, doing some restarting or whatever. So anyone at home, when you're watching, do not worry, it's not your own computer, it's Yvette's, and we're looking forward to her.
In fact, there's a message from Yvette to say that her apologies, but her laptop has overheated. So I think that may mean it's difficult for her to rejoin for the end of the talk. So
just getting an update, her laptop has overheated, which doesn't sound so good. It may be difficult for her to rejoin. What I'll do is stay here for a moment, I think, and look at the screen, because she had just got to a particularly interesting part of the talk, as you can see, with the range of work that it's possible to do with these uncrewed aircraft. So I'll wait here and see what happens. But an overheated computer, well, I guess either being overheated or being frozen is not great, and being both overheated and frozen is quite a problem. So we'll wait for a moment and see what's happening. I think we'll give it a moment while she's looking to see what can be done with her computer. I'll mention this is the second of 3 online events today that the Aviation Festival are sending out. At 4:30, Skiff Dobney from ARC Area Aero Mobility will be talking about advanced air mobility. Aha! Well,
Hello.
that's good timing, Yvette. Well done. Now, we were thinking about your computer being both overheated and frozen, and just thinking, well, neither of us like to be overheated, or none of us like to be that, but you had both. But welcome back indeed. Right.
Sorry about that. Yeah. Computer overheated and had blue screen. Yeah, but all seems okay now.
Well, this is wonderful. This gives us added confidence in what Windracers can achieve. I will step
always
back.
Straight back at it.
And you.
Yeah, I think at the time I was talking about the our work with the Swarm project. So yeah, we're doing this environmental work, so surveys in Antarctica. Hopefully that'll go ahead the beginning of next year. And what that looks like is payloads attached to the aircraft, flying over sea ice, and being able to penetrate deep into that, and being able to monitor and see how that's developing. And then something else we're working on within that project is this forest fire detection and mitigation. So working with fire and rescue services and developing that swarm technology, which is really instrumental to being able to do that mitigation, and having that technology exist. And as the industry grows, obviously the hostile nature towards that, so hacking and stuff like that will also likely grow. So we're also working in anti-jamming and spoofing technology. I think that's actually the end of everything that I was going to say. Don't think there's any more slides. So yeah, any questions? And I'm sorry that I cut out at the end there.
But that was fine. I think it's great that you're back. Actually, there was one question that came in, which is, I guess, relevant when things go wrong. This is the question of what happens if something goes wrong. For instance, if one engine, I noticed 2 engines there, one engine cuts out, what happens? Are there systems? Well, there obviously are systems, but exactly how do they work?
So as I say, the whole aircraft was designed with this like multiple redundant systems. So being able to fly on single engine. So let's say we have a single engine failure and still being able to land the aircraft. So we train quite a lot with our operators on being able to do that. It is able to maintain flight on just one engine, but obviously less efficiently. So if we did have that kind of failure, being able to still bring it back in, and a lot of the lead up to operations, so particularly in Orkney, is that, you know, what do we do if this happens at this point, or you know, if it's here, where do we go, and that kind of side of things. So yeah, it's all planned out on where the aircraft will go. It can still maintain that flight. Maybe a bigger one is sort of if we had that loss of communication. So if the ground control operator lost communication with the aircraft, what will it do and where will it go? A lot of people often think, you know, is it out of control? Is it, you know, is anyone guiding it, sort of thing? And we have this technology, which means if we lose control, if we lose connection, if we lose that being able to command it from Kirkwall or from wherever we're operating from, then it's still able to follow a route. It still stays within that segregated airspace, and it returns exactly to where we want to and follows the line that we would expect it to. That's probably the main thing there, where it's very clear what the aircraft is going to do and easily recoverable by our safety pilots.
Now, if all goes well and the various processes of testing succeed, you're actually looking then at Windracers setting up an operation at Kirkwall, linking communities in the Highlands and Islands.
Exactly. I think that's a major part of what we're trying to achieve here, being able to grow that community and being able to like add those skills to the community of being able to fly those routes, having that ground control operator, but also we really do see drones as the future of aviation. So bringing those skills to Orkney and Shetland, and growing those, like that community and that aviation sort of community, to be able to add on to the logistics that are already existing. I don't think that there's any chance that we're still quite a small aircraft. We plan to do like a lot of routes and be reliable and regular. So I don't think we look to, you know, encroach on anyone else. It's really this additional service, you know, where you don't necessarily need to get a pilot out of bed to be able to supply, you know, medical supplies where they're needed. You know, this emergency kind of route. And that's what we would like to go in the future. We've had, so these trials that we've got coming up is this proof of concept, this idea that, you know, we can operate day in, day out for multiple weeks, and then moving towards like having this assurance of safety for the Civil Aviation Authority, and how they want to grow and how they want to move with the regulation. And over the last sort of year, as we've been part of SATE, we've seen this massive growth in where the CAA is going, and like the processes that they want to put in. Something they're moving towards in the future is this temporary restricted area, which would mean that we could operate with unsegregated, with crewed aircraft, and the potential of that, which would mean that we weren't restricted to necessarily going directly to one airfield, but being able to, you know, be where and when we needed.
This would be a great advantage then, for instance, for inter-island transport.
Exactly, yeah. Inter-island transport is really like Orkney and Shetland have this really unique geography that allows us to do exactly what we set out to do, this middle mile logistics, where we connect airfields over, in Orkney that might be over sea, over hostile terrain maybe, and in other areas where we're doing humanitarian aid, that would look like maybe dangerous areas where we can just overfly. So yeah, this idea of this middle mile logistics between airports, again, not aiming to do this sort of like deliver to your doorstep type thing, but making sure that we get those critical supplies between Orkney and the surrounding islands.
Are you finding that various businesses are approaching you? I mean, I'm not asking about individual businesses, but I was just thinking there might be some businesses, say, for example, island shops, that
Absolutely.
might actually be thinking this could be a really, really good way, because you could imagine that one particular supplier, one wholesaler, then could send you a payload, and you could visit several islands in a circuit.
It's exactly what we did. I think as part of SATE 1, we picked up some bags of wool, and took them back to Kirkwall. It really is for that purpose of where people need us, and picking that up and being able to take it areas that maybe are quite voluminous payloads, but don't weigh too much. Like obviously we can transport that, and then those high quality things that might be quite a bit smaller but weigh a bit more. So yeah.
Are you at the stage, in fact, where you're welcoming inquiries, or is it still a bit early?
Always, yeah. We are still working. These are still trial operations, so there is always going to be that. We're still working out which communities require us more than others, and how to fit into that. So whether we need to go perhaps more to North Wanneldy than Edy, or how the local community requires us. We're still working that side of things out, but definitely looking to communicate with people and bring that into us, and from that, just it's a learning process. We'll learn with them, and we'll operate as we need to. Yeah.
With the landing of uncrewed aircraft like this, do you need the full-scale operating procedures and facilities of a full-scale island airfield, or are there some provisions within the regulations that give a bit more latitude?
So the aircraft itself can land really wherever you need it to do so, as long as you've got that runway. It can be an unprepared runway. We've landed in grass and gravel and that kind of stuff. And obviously for our Antarctica expeditions, they'll be really landing wherever they need to land. So it can, the technology is there, definitely. But we are restricted by regulation at the moment. It's not that we need the full standard operating procedures that perhaps we do in Kirkwall, that we wouldn't necessarily need them for an uncontrolled airfield. But we do have them set up, obviously, because we're operating from standard airports who are still running their own services while we're there. And that was a big part of our training as well, being able to operate around other aircraft. And the airfield that we do our training at, it is an operating airfield. It has its flight school, and being able to coordinate around that, and use air traffic control to make sure that we have that deconfliction.
Just to summarize again, you mentioned earlier roughly about the timetable. I mean, how long until, possibly all being well, a service like this might be up and running?
So we plan on setting up these operations and operating for months at a time. The issue with that is that we set up temporary danger areas, and you can only have temporary danger areas for 3 months. So that would be our limiting factor. The way the regulation is moving over the coming years, we're expecting that to come through, to be able to operate unsegregated as and when we need to. Yeah.
is fascinating. We will look forward to hearing more and wish you every success.
Come watch us, please do.
Fascinating. I think a lot of people indeed would like to see and find out more. Thank you indeed, Yvette. And
Thank you for having me.
thank you. And just before we round off, I should say we'll be back at 4:30 with Skiff Dobney of ARC Aerial Mobility. Thanks again, Yvette, and bye for now.